Hello everyone, this is Rodalist, and I am here to give you a short tutorial on how to use the CoA models that you just downloaded. So when you get here, at first, you're just going to have a single layer activated, and it's just going to be the model. Don't worry, I didn't leave you with just the model and no way to really use it. I actually made them so that they come included with a rig. Each one of them has their own individual rig. I started with Sally here because she has the most basic one. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, if you don't know how to use Blender very well, there's tons of great tutorials out there. I'm going to give you a quick tips on the basics real quick. Let's open up the in here and start the screencast display so you can see what I'm clicking. But essentially, in order to move around, you're going to be using your shift control buttons and the middle mouse wheel. The middle mouse wheel will actually allow you to zoom in. You can see it light there up on the bottom left. And it does a lot of great stuff too. By hitting shift and the mouse wheel, you can actually go up and down. And by control, you can go hitting the control button and the mouse wheel, you can go left and right. Now, if you hold down the mouse wheel control button, you are actually able to move the or orbit around the object or whatever's been selected. If you hit control and the scroll button, you can actually zoom in and out in a more meaningful way rather than just, actually no, I don't think that does anything different. That's not different. It just, instead of scrolling the mouse wheel, I'm actually just moving my cursor. I'm moving my the mouse itself. Not a huge diff, not a huge gain. Anyway, you can select things in Blender by hitting the right mouse button. I'm sorry. You won't really need to do this very often with the object itself, since you'll be using you'll be using the rig to transform and move Sally around here. But if you ever want to grab anything like that, go into edit mode, see how it's made, that kind of stuff, by hitting the tab button, you can do that. And then, speaking of grabbing, you select the object that you want to move. You hit the G button, and that allows you to move it in any direction that you want. Once you hit G, you can just sort of move it around using your mouse as you would for anything else. You want it to go back in place without having to actually put it back in place. You hit the right mouse button again, and it'll snap back. It basically cancels whatever else you were working on. You can be more specific about where you want things to move by grabbing and hitting the X button. I can move it along the X axis and only the X axis. Hit the right mouse button, it'll stop moving. Then I can grab it on Y, and I can grab, whoops, that's Z. Z gives me wireframe. I don't really want that. Hit Z again, will bring me back to solid. I can use these this visualization button here, or whatever the display method, allows me to go back up to material where we were. So you can change the way things look by hitting this button and moving things around. You can go to materials or just the textures. It'll take all of the things that don't actually have textures applied to them, and they'll just be solid. You can go to rendered mode, see what it would look like once you've hit the render button over here, but it's a preview. Now on to business. You don't want to just move around pieces and parts of Sally. That's not fun or interesting, and you want to be able to model and not model, but you want to be able to pose her and animate her and all that kind of stuff. So what you want to do is make the rig layer visible, and the rig layer is actually right below the display layer. This is the display of Sally. It's yellow to show that I've selected an object, and also grayed out or darker to show that it's been pushed in. If I move this, hit that, now I'm on another layer. This layer is where the camera is. I've selected the camera, and you can see that. Now, back to Sally. If you hold the shift button down and tap the layer below, you can have multiple layers selected at once. There we go. There is Sally's rig. It looks like the Rigify rig. If you're familiar with Blender, you know that Blender has an option called Rigify that allows you to make a rig or make the control points of a rig. But I didn't actually do that because I have not once in my whole life been able to get that particular modifier to work. So I had to kind of build this one sort of to look like it, but not exactly function like it does. Okay, next topic, which is the controls. I have marked each one of the bones, like they're color coded. The left, all the left bones are blue. All of the right bones are green. All of the modifier bones, like this one right here, that toggle the visibility of something, are green. They're all gonna be green. The things that control the eyes, they're purple. The stuff that controls Sally's gross movement down here is purple. And basically her center spine bones, her tail, her pelvis, her hips, and all this kind of stuff. Well, hips and then pelvis, and her what do you call that? Chest. I mean, vertebrae. I guess they're all vertebrae. But these are all yellow, and her neck, even though it looks like it's around her head, it controls her neck bone, which moves her head. These are all yellow. It's not a commentary on any of the characters. I just thought it would stand out and be easy to recognize. Each one of the characters is essentially set up this way. All of them are, in fact, with their bones below the visible model layer and with the color scheme as well. So, this is like a data control bone. It doesn't actually deform the mess, the green here. This is just jacket visibility for Sally. You can move it down and it'll make her jacket go away if you want to have poses where Sally's jacket is not on. I'll grab. And you want to make sure you pull it all the way up to the on position in order to make sure that all of the masks are applied. Essentially what it does is it controls masks that I've applied to the character model and when they are visible and stuff. And it controls when they render and when they are in the regular view mode. So you want to keep that kind of stuff coming in. And up here is the control switch for Sally's left and right arm. It doesn't control their arms, just controls the manner in which you are able to manipulate them. Currently, the arms and legs are all in IK, or inverse kinematics mode, which means that you control them from the hands on up. If you move it along grab it with the G like I did with the other things, move it along the X-axis, now Sally's arm has bent. And you can control the pitch of her elbow by moving this little arrow bone here any way you really want it, mostly along the Z axis. You can get her shoulder to roll and all that kind of stuff. Alright, now, what's important about this to remember is that these switches control whether or not it's controlled by the inverse kinematic or forward kinematics FK control scheme. So if I go to the left toggle here and I move that over to FK, her arm will straighten out. And it's straightening out because the IK rig no longer has any control over the rig, or it's been dampened to a point where now I can't move her arm that way. Essentially, you'll be moving Sally's arms by rotating them at the joints. Sort of like forward kinematics. It's like, to explain this, inverse kinematics is like someone grabbing your hand and pushing it around, and therefore they're moving your arm. And forward kinematics is basically sort of like your shoulder moving your hand around. Your hand being oriented in whatever direction your shoulder goes, or say your forearm bone. We're gonna rotate this along Z. Did I say it? Yeah. Basically, I'm holding down the scroll wheel and I'm just moving it around. It allows you to do that orbiting thing, like I said earlier, and holding Shift to kind of pan over. And all of this is controlled this way. The two arms are individually attached to the IK or FK, so I can have the left arm controlled FK and the right arm controlled IK style, and they can happen in tandem, essentially. Now, regardless of IK or FK constraints, this ring here will always control the rotation of Sally's hand. So, if I want that to rotate along Y, I just hit the R button and rotate along the Y-axis. And it all moves along that accordingly. I want to rotate along the Z, I can do that. So, that's sort of how you control her arms. And she also has some shoulder bones here that allow you to make really wide changes, as you might imagine. Okay. Those are the arms. Here are the legs. The legs are always in IK mode. There is no FK option for that. I could change that, but I feel like it's not really all that necessary. I mean, it depends. If you guys have a problem with it or need that to be fixed, just let me know. And if there's enough of you people, not you guys, saying that you want that, then I'll think about it. Alright, so first we're going to go ahead and cancel out the rotations and grabs. So we go hit the A button, and then we go Alt-G, Alt-R, and just for good measure, Alt-Scale. And I'll show you what that's for later. Essentially, we've just sort of canceled out all the rotations that were attached to the bones. Down here is where you control Sally's feet. So if you want her to walk, this is where you do it. You grab the foot, and then you lift it up, or you can pull it back, or you can even rotate it along the x-axis or y-axis, however you want it to be, and you're controlling your foot. We're going to lift that up real quick. And these points, very much like for the elbows of Sally, these control her knees. You grab that, move that along X, and you can control the way her knees are pointing. I'll grab. Down here are two rings, one that controls Sally's, I guess, the bridge of her foot, and one that controls her toe. You can rotate this any way you want. This might be easier to see down here on the right. But if you rotate this one along the X axis, you can get her to kind of stand on her tiptoes. This is the foot roll bone, essentially. And you can then pull back her other foot there. And you can imagine any old thing you want to have done. So those are all like the limbs, I think. I think that's all the limbs. Yeah, we talked about the arms and the legs. Now let's talk about the spine bones in the middle. Here you have the spine bones. This is her, these are her hips. This controls her waist, her pelvis, and all that kind of stuff. You can rotate that along the X, and essentially it'll follow that. I don't know what that is. I'm gonna probably end up having to fix it, but I have never seen that before. Ignore it? Okay. That has nothing to do with anything. Okay. So, yeah, you can move her her pelvis. I'm gonna have to re-upload this thing after I fix whatever that is. So, if you're watching this video now and you downloaded the original version, I'm gonna put out a version 2. And hopefully this is gone. I don't know what that is. Very sorry about that. But like I said, there's going to be issues that I did not foresee. Like, this has never happened before. So we'll deal with it. Anyway, you can control her her waist. You can rotate this along X if you want. And now it's gone. Okay. And you can control her tail any way you want. I'm staying on X just because it's easier to kind of show you from the side profile what it's doing. You can move any one of her bones, rotate them, grab them, all those kinds of transformations, any way you want. There is no wrong answer here. Well, I mean, I guess there is if you just go nuts with it. That's a wrong answer. I wouldn't do that. You can break the model. The model's not broken, but you can twist it in such a way that it's all jacked up. But I think anyone who has any understanding of working with models or rigs knows that that's just a hazard of any kind of situation. So we're going to hit Control Z. Always have that Control Z ready. And yeah, that's how that is. But because, okay, so one thing to notice is also that whenever IK is on, they are rooted to one spot. They are going to stay where the IK rig tells them to while they are under its influence. You can move them still, but they will not follow the rest of the bone. They are designed not to. So don't freak out if that happens. It's all fine. It's all gravy. You're good. You didn't do anything wrong. Rotate along Z. I don't know. I'm liking this so far. All right. So those are the arms and those are the legs, the spine bones. Oh, we want her to look up now. So we can actually grab her neck, head bone, or whatever. Rotate that along X. And there you go. Now she's looking forward to a new adventure. Anyway, so, yeah. That's how you control the very basic movements of the body. How you control the IK and FK constraints. We're just going to bring those over so that her arms go straight again. Doesn't really matter. You can choose your way to move this. Next things next, we're going to talk about the shape key driver bones and, of course, her eyes. So this is Sally's eye control. It looks like a pair of glasses, and it should always stay outside of her face. If it doesn't, then there's a problem. But I feel like I fixed it. I'm going to grab this along Z. And as you can see, it controls Sally's eyes, where she's looking. It always looks ahead. So if I rotate her head to a certain place, it always looks to where the eye bone is, to the purple. And if it's over there, then you can still grab it along the x-axis, and then she can look to her left. Essentially, it just controls her face. Next thing I want to show you, like I said, is the shape key drivers. These are bones. They don't deform anything. They just control the shape keys that I put into her head. If you move this one, these are the bottom lids. Move here. This is the middle brow. We can control her her eyebrow by bringing it up. We can control her eyelids by selecting this here. They're sort of in the shape and in the general vicinity of the bone that you want to use. And I think it's pretty intuitive. I think it should be helpful. There are obviously more complex and better rigs in this, but this I think works for these models. You can control her mouth corner up. You can make her frown. You can pull that down. We're going to make her smile a little bit. Sally always looks best when she's scheming. And essentially bring these bones up. And so yeah, that's basically how you control Sally's model. This is, like I said, the most basic of them. The other character models essentially follow this same sort of design philosophy. They all do the same type of things. Oh yeah, you can open her mouth too. Just experiment with the bones. Essentially, if you understand the grab tool and you understand that the bones are on a different layer, and if you don't want to see them anymore, you just sort of select the body again. I mean, this layer right here. Then you're pretty much good to go. One last thing, guys. I want to show you how to control the hands before we move on. I have moved into a new sort of era when it comes to controlling hands and fingers. Essentially, you control Sally's fingers, Nicole's, Bunny's, and Fiona's fingers from their tips. They're all IK rigged. There's no way to change this. They're all like that all the time. So just keep that in mind. You can grab the little balls, though, and you can move them along any axis that you want them to move. Any axis. And you can curl her fingers. You can bring them up. You can bring them in. You can bring them back down again. You can control just how severe her fingers are. Let me go to solid or material here so you can see what's going on. Yeah, get some differentiation in there. You can control just how much the finger is bent by hitting the corresponding arrow bone here, and rotate that on any axis that you want. We're going to do Y because that makes more sense for the way Sally is standing. And you can grab this along Y to bring her finger inward. And that's essentially how you control the fingers. You can scale these to get them to kind of auto-tighten by scaling it in. And even after that, you can move around the little sphere at the end of her finger and move it accordingly to however you want it to be posed. This provides more dexterity in the hand bones and joints, makes them easier to work with, in my opinion. Let me know if that's not the case. I mean, I've been working with them for months, so I think it's great. But you guys are all new to this, or at least new to the things that I've made. Not saying you're new to Blender, but I am saying that I'm more familiar with the things that I made than maybe you are. And that's not a knock. I'm just saying. I've been working with it for months. I've got nose blindness of a Blender kind, you know? So, that being said, these are all the bones that control Sally's body, her movements, and all those kinds of things. These are more accurately described as just the gross movements. Now, moving on. I'm going to run through just a few differences in each one of the other models and their control schemes. I'll be back in just a second. Okay, so here we are with Bunny. Essentially, she has the same control scheme as Sally, and they all have the same one, so I'm not going to keep saying that. But here's where she's different. Bunny has a hat toggle. This is where we kind of control things. We have, of course, the IKFK switcher up there at the top, but then you can also turn off her hat, so it's just hair. There is a little latency between the hat and hair thing, so just be sure to have it all the way up or all the way down when you actually do use it. I think somewhere in this file is her hat, if it's just by itself, but I'm not sure where I put it. I can make sure that's visible next update. And then, of course, we have jacket visibility, where you turn that off, and you can turn it on, and it's all gravy. Okay. Essentially, though, Bunny works the same way Sally does with the center bones. You can control her tail, rotating it however you want. It's not a huge deal. We're going to move to texture mode here so it moves a little bit faster. You can control Bunny's ears. Unlike Sally, Bunny has ears that can actually be moved. Rotate along X just to show off that functionality. That is oddly shaped. But anyway, so there's that. You can control her head and eyes just like everyone else. And one thing, though, I would like to point out that makes her a little bit different is her robot arm. It is not rigged the same way as her other arm is. It's got a few differences, mostly that they don't matter to you. They only matter to me because I had to make that work. It's not a huge problem. Not a problem at all, actually. It's just how she is. But her shoulder pad moves independently of her shoulder. So keep that in mind. I've made a bone for it. It toggles. Not toggles, but you can pivot her bone however you need that to go. If you need that to be at that angle, you need to rotate it along Z a little bit to fit or match the actual pitch of this wheel ball joint gizmo that's in her arm. You know, that's just a little bit of detail that you might want to keep in mind. The other part of this is down here at her feet. You've got her knees, of course, that are controlled just like Sally's knees are. Her feet are controlled just like Sally's feet. Rotate along X. Rotate along X. Okay. But her, she has knee pads that are controlled very much like her shoulder pad is. And this is in the event that you lift her knee in some way. And her knee pad is kind of like looking like it wouldn't be all the way up like this. They would be, her knee would be in line with the actual joint, which would counter itself out, which would balance itself to compensate for the way she was moving her thigh and her shin. So you rotate this one along, say, X, and it can be pivoted any way, like I said. Any way you need it to be. Rotate along Z just a little bit. Anyway, so that allows you to keep track and have more or better looking posing as far as I'm concerned. I like it when you have a lot of places where you can control a model instead of just one. You control Bunny's fingers just the same way you control Sally's. They're just more straight because she has a robot hand instead of an organic one, and therefore they are all pointed in the same general direction. Rotate along Y. You can scale them, make it look like she's like sitting on something or putting her hand on some sort of... That's essentially what the point of this hand control scheme is anyway. Just giving you more control over whichever aspect you want to control of the hand. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but you can. You can do it. That's the point. You can control their teeth. You can control their mouth. I wanted to give as much control as possible to these posing. So you could pose them. You could animate them. You could do whatever you want. That was the point. These work primarily in Blender, not Source Filmmaker, unfortunately. I don't know how to get these to work in Source Filmmaker. I've made a few things for Source Filmmaker in the past, but like this whole scheme is incompatible at the moment. So if you want someone to, if you want to move them over to Source Filmmaker, you're gonna have to find someone who does that, because that's not, it's just not gonna happen. I'm sorry, not out of this house. Okay. So yeah, just like everything else, she moves. You can move this and move her whole body and all that kind of stuff in any direction, even up and down. Now it is time to move on. I think I've shown everything that needs to be shown with Bunny. We are going to come back and we're going to talk about Nicole. One moment. Here is Nicole, and her control scheme is different yet than Bunny's and Sally's in just a few different ways. Nicole has an eye glow and a sword toggle. The sword toggle is just making her sword either visible or not. Be sure to bring it all the way up or all the way down. She has an eye glow toggle as well that changes a mask that's built into her eyes to on, so that in rendered mode you can see her eye glow. And that's what they do. It's superfluous. It's not important. It doesn't really add anything. It's just I thought it looked cool, so I added it, you know? Anyway, that's Nicole. You can control Nicole's ears much the same way you can control Bunny's, except they only have one joint in them. Bunny's have at least three. Rotate that along the x-axis. You can rotate them along the z-axis. It's however you want. Rotate along X. And then you can actually copy this over. Control copy, Shift Control V, so that her other ear is doing the same thing. I think that's pretty cool. We can control her head, rotate along X. Move her eyes up a little bit. So if I want to move her eyes up along the Z-axis, I can. And basically that is the control scheme of Nicole. The other difference here, actually, now that I said that it's not much difference, another difference of Nicole's control scheme is her hair. Unlike the other character models, her hair actually is, you can move it in some directions. It's shape key driven, so not bone driven. So there are limits, but you can move them along the X axis here. So if you want her hair to flow behind her, you can rotate that along Z. If you want her, Y actually is a little more powerful for that. If you want it to move to either side, you rotate it. And that's how you control her hair, though, so it doesn't interfere with her tail or anything else like that. I think you guys get the point by now. You can control her dress by grabbing this ring and scaling it. It goes up when you do that. You can rotate it along the y-axis to get it to move either left or right. You can do these things in tandem and scale it again. Kinds of things. Always be careful. You can easily wreck the rig. And actually, in general, when working with Nicole, she's a little bit more of a pain in the butt because her dress clips through things, and I couldn't really find a way to make that not happen. I mean, I could have applied a whole bunch of corrective shapes, but I'm like, that's not really going to solve it. I mean, it would have solved it, but I don't know. Just be careful when posing Nicole. She's a lively one. Always looking for ways to ruin whatever you make and to not function properly. Rotate along X. Just beware of the Nicole. Beware the smile. Next, we're going to talk about Fiona and how she differs from Nicole, Sally, and Bunny. So here's Fiona. Same setup as last time, as all the other times. Her fingers control the same way, and the only difference really is her tail. You can make her jacket invisible. You can turn it back on. Now, the gun's visible. There are two toggles for that. One is for the guns in her hands. The other is for the guns in her holsters. You hit the guns. I mean, if you're going to have her guns in her hands, they probably should not be in her holsters, so you go ahead and turn them invisible. Boom. That solves that problem. But of course, contrary-wise, if you have her guns visible in her holsters, they should not be in her hands. Make them invisible. It'll affect both the render and the object presentation, so you don't have to worry about doing anything extra in any of the menus. Nicole controls in much of the same way as everybody else does. You can control her tail here, because it is the longest tail of any of the models that I'm including in the pack. Rotate that along X. You can rotate them any way you want. Just keep in mind what you're doing, and you should be fine. That's not fine, as you can see. Alt grab. Alt R, actually. Okay. I think that's everything. Alt R. Oh, and, okay, so you can see up here that Fiona, I hope I've not been calling her Nicole this whole time, has ear controls, just like Nicole. Fiona has ear controls like Nicole and Buddy. I hope I said that right. But they're not as good. I wouldn't use them because they tend to stretch her head in weird ways, and I wouldn't if I were you. You can. They're there. You can do whatever you want, man. Is your model now. I'm going to make some updates and solve some problems that I just found, and after that, you on your own, because I'm moving on to some other projects. Hey. But yeah, essentially, same control scheme as the other two. Okay. Finally, we're going to talk about how to move these models around so that you can have multiple models in the same place. Just in case you don't know how to do that already, I'm going to show you. We're going to walk through this, and it's all going to be gravy. So, here's the deal. If you want to keep your models pristine, you want them to be a certain way, that means you don't want to edit the models doing any kind of action or anything like that inside of the file that they originate from. What you're going to want to do is create a scene where the models can all exist, be changed and edited, but essentially have no effect on the way they are presented. Like, to avoid any unnecessary tears, we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about how to bring in models to a new scene. Delete this face. Whole box, actually. And another thing I would like you guys to remember is that they're made to work in cycles render. You can get them to work in Blender render, I'm sure, if you know how to remake textures and that kind of stuff, but everything is pretty much designed around cycles, so they're a little less than versatile in that way, unfortunately, but I'm sure you guys can figure it out. You're smart people. Alright, so let's bring in an object. In order to do that, we want to go up to File, and we want to hit Append, the button called Append. Now, it'll take you to, your file directory. Okay, and you can see which models you're going to be bringing into your area here. I like to hit this little button so I know which model I'm working with, and I know that these are all the ones that I was working with because Sally is in that pose that we left her in. Nicole is in the pose that we left her in. You can get to see a small thumbnail of what you're working with. So we're going to bring in Sally just because it's easy and simple, and we're not really going to do too much with this. In order to bring in parts of Sally, she is in multiple pieces. Sally is, you'll see in a moment. These are all of the files associated with Sally objects. I have made it simpler for you guys to browse through that by going into the search bar up here at the top with a little eyeglass. You can actually type in CoA, and it'll bring up all of the relevant files for Sally's body, or for just Sally in general. So Sally body COA, Sally boots COA, Sally eyes COA, Sally hair COA, Sally head COA, Sally jacket COA, Sally shirt, Sally shorts. You want to bring all these things in because they're all connected to the mesh in one way or another. You do not have to bring in, and I repeat, do not have to bring in the rig. The rig is already parented to these objects. When you bring in all these other objects, if you just brought in one of those other objects, it would come with the rig. So there's no need to do that. So you append from library, and here's Sally. She's been appended. You can go to texture mode to see her a little bit better. And there she is. Okay. Not quite in the position that I wanted to be in. So we're just going to grab this. Just select the... Oh, also, when you bring her into another model, into another space, all of the assets are going to be on the same layer. You may want it that way. You may not like to have the assets on a different layer. I just think sometimes the rig gets in the way. Alright, we're going to move Sally's model up there. And there it is. Right there on the grid floor. And her eyes have done a little flipping around because when you do that, of course, it invariably does things to the rig. But it's not a huge deal. And I'll show you why. Because you can always just bring her eyes back down. It's not an issue. But yeah, there's Sally. You can bring her in as long as you select the right number of objects. Now we're going to do it one more time. We're going to bring in another model that we were just working with. We can go to open recent, but we're not going to do that. We're going to do append. We can't do open recent. That'll just open up a new file, and we don't want that actually at this moment. We're going to go to Nicole, the HoloLinks here. We're going to open up objects, and we're going to go ahead and do the same thing we did with Sally. We're going to type in COA. There are some things that you do not need to bring in for Nicole, such as the hair deformer, the dress box, those kind of things. All you need is Nicole's eyes, her sash. The hair deformer and the dress box are just ways to control Nicole's hair and dress, which is what those rings were. It's not that complicated, but it's more than I want to get into right now. It's just how the method that I found to control those is essentially a shape key attached to a bone. I just got into it. Sorry. Anyway, you can bring in her sword, you can bring in her head, you can bring in her body, and it's good to have all of your options. If you don't want Nicole to have her sword, you don't have to bring her in with her sword. It is unimportant. It doesn't mean anything. But if you want to just be able to make it visible or invisible, maybe in the last minute you're like, oh, I want her to have her sword, I want to have her gauntlets and her gloves. She's going to need her gloves. And her hair. Bring all those things in. Head, body, boots, dress, gauntlets, gloves, hair, sword, sash, which is her belt thing. You want that. It splits up her character design very nicely. And eyes, you want to bring those things here and append from library. And do what you did with Sally here, essentially. You just bring it up, grab it along Z, and then you move it over to the side. You move it wherever you want, but I'm just doing it. I'm moving it over to the side right now. Nicole's eyes have gotten kind of out of sorts, just like what they did with Sally, but like I said, you just select pose mode. You can just go in there and grab that. Do whatever you feel is necessary. Grab it along X, I believe. There we go. And there's Nicole. Now you have these two models in here. You can do whatever you want with them. You can pose them. You can do that sort of thing. And you'll be all good. This same process can be repeated over and over again with any object or any asset that you want to bring into the scene. You can make models right here. You can make changes here and that kind of thing. But they'll all be right here localized in this particular space in this model or this file. We're going to hit 0 to go to the camera. And we see the camera is kind of off. You want to make sure that you have control over where the camera goes. So I like to do this. I like to hit N. And I like to go to lock camera to view. I believe that's just a built-in option. If it's not, it might be an add-on. You can find it somewhere online. And essentially, you can move the camera the same way I've been moving the in-world camera, the world camera. Okay, so now we got Sally and Nicole in the shot. We can go to the rendered mode here. There they are. That's not really great light. We're going to change the light source too. Essentially, I'm going to show you guys how to do a render real quick. The ones that I make. I'd also like this to be calculated by my GPU and not my CPU, just because GPU is faster in most cases. If your computer has a dedicated graphics card or GPU, graphical processing unit, then I would definitely opt to use that pretty much every time. So we're going to go to wherever I have that lamp at. There's the lamp. Select it. We're going to go to its options, and we're going to turn that into a sun. Still not that great. I don't know. So what we're going to do is we're going to go out of rendered mode, go to material. Look at why I don't like it. Well, the reason I don't like it is because behind my principles, rotate along Z, and it's pointed away from them. We're pointing out their backs. Bring this up. How's that look? Any better? A lot better, actually. Quite a bit. Nicole's hair is just kind of dark. We'll fix that by adding some global illumination to the world. And in order to do that, you go to the World tab here on the side menu. You go to Preview. Go to say Use Nodes. You see the background there. You click on that. This little thing here in the color section, and you go to sky texture. This is what I've been doing to kind of get some background illumination, and there you go. You got a little bit more light. Not enough because it's the same brightness, so we're gonna turn that up to about 3. It's kind of blown out, but okay, we'll go to 2.5. All right, and I don't want to see that blue stuff in the background, so we're gonna go to transparent. Bam. Now it's just these two characters floating in a transparent abyss. It's great. You can see them just sort of like floating, arms outstretched in a very unnatural and uncomfortable looking way. It does not matter. This is just showing you guys how to do it. Now often my settings are set to compress. I like to have them up all to 100%. That way there's maximum compression. The file output is a little bit slower, but the file size is a little bit smaller, and that is super important to me. Because when you have files that are too big, they don't fit on DeviantArt. They have that terrible 80 megabyte limit on everything, and you cannot upload videos. So if I want to make an animated anything, it needs to be a GIF, and therefore I need to be working with the smallest, lightest files possible. And it's just, you know, it's I don't care. I'm not gonna complain about DeviantArt. I do it enough on my own. I'm not gonna waste your time with it. Let's go ahead and go to 0. Alright, we're going to change the camera's perspective too. It's not important that you do this. I just like doing this. I like to do orthographic. That way I can get everything I want to get. Also, I can zoom in on it without moving the camera. Because you can't do that with perspective. You can't zoom in and not move the camera. The camera moves regardless. And it's just, I don't know, distracting to me. So yeah, so there they are. Sally and Nicole. And yeah, next thing you want to look at is your render settings, how big it is. I have the resolution at 1920 by 1080, and the percentage of scale resolution is at 100%, meaning that if this image, if I render it, is going to be a true 1920 by 1080. Anyway, that's how you control that. I like having it at 100% just because why not? I also like turning the border on because sometimes I want to change some things while I'm rendering it, and also this uses up less of your computer's memory. I move Nicole's eyes, it refreshes, and now they're shining green again. So yeah, this is kind of how the thing you do. You pose them. You can pose them now if you want to. I just had them posed in the other file, and I said that you shouldn't do that, but this was just a way to expedite that process. I'm gonna change them back in the original files later. So yeah, there's that. That is how you set up a shot. And the next thing you want to look at is sampling. The number of samples in your shot determines how much grain is in that shot. Right now, if I were to render this, it would render pretty quickly, actually, because of my GPU. We'll render it. Just a moment. I'm going to show you what that looks like. Just going to hit the render button. Bam. Alright, so you can see this is the completed project. It actually looks pretty good. This is a lower sample rate. It's at 128 samples for this render. And it looks fine, actually. I was going to show you the difference. Like, you can see a little bit of grain, but if this image was fully blown up, like to 1920 by 1080, which it is, but you look at this DeviantArt, you can't zoom in but so far, and people wouldn't really be able to see this, so it doesn't matter at all. I was going to try to show you a different version, but this really is unnecessary. That's fine. That's how you make a render. The next thing you want to do, of course, is to save this image, because if you just close Blender right now, it'll be all this progress will be gone. This is currently, I think, in the temp folder. You could probably find it there, but it's not saved. So you go to Image and you go to Save as Image, and you go to your classical place where you normally save your images at. I like to keep things orderly. Usually, I put them in the renders section of my CoA stuff. This is all my CoA renders. Everything I've done with this Chronicles of Acorn project has been put into this particular spot, and this is just sort of how I make things. There you go. A little bit of behind the scenes for you. We're gonna name this Sally and Nicole! Exclamation point. Doesn't really matter. Just as long as it's not any of these names, it should be fine. It'll make that go away. Yeah. .png, save as image, and these are the options that we were doing earlier. And there you go. That's how you do it. Essentially, that is the tutorial. That is how you make a render with these models. That's how you bring them into a scene. That's how you pose them. And I think that's basically everything. If there's something that you want to know specifically about the models, if you want to know how to modify them, to change them, you can always send me a message. You want to change Sally's clothes. Essentially, Sally's clothes are just an extruded version of her body, and her body is all physically there. It's just hidden because I put a bunch of masks on it. Same for Nicole here. But of course, most of this is all her dress, but not really. This is just a mask that I made. Like, these things can be edited. You can do whatever you want with them, like I said. But yeah, that's that. And there we go. Thank you guys for watching, and I look forward to your questions if you have any. Goodbye.